All right, guys. So I keep on seeing this like video essay that seems to be going a little viral, talking about I think it's called "Who Killed the DCEU." And you know me, I'm trying to slurp slurp baby, trying to get some of that virality. You know what I mean? I can leech off of more popular content. I'm not ashamed. I'm not above doing such a thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, let's get into this. My dog is currently, well, not my dog, a dog I'm looking after. He's currently harassing me. He wants me to pet him, so I will take time out of this video to pet him. I'm not going to edit this out, just to be clear. You're just going to sit there and wait for me to finish rubbing him because he's a very good boy and he needs to be pet. All right, now we shall hit play.
It happened again. There I was.
Oh wait, let me. Okay, now he's being a little too insistent. Hold on. Let me actually listen. All right, we're gonna put this at 2x speed because yeah.
But city, minding my own business, when I remembered James Gunn's Superman would jumpstart a new DC universe, and that the old DC Extended Universe, a decade-old franchise meant to rival Marvel's, is now completely, absolutely dead.
What's wrong?
It's dead. Bury it.
So the question here is, how could this happen? How did a franchise promising so much end with only one Superman film, a failed Justice League movie, no Batman film, and 3 Harley Quinn movies? It was supposed to be the DC brand brought to life. Characters we dreamed of seeing debuting and...
Does he mean? Oh, I guess he means 3 Harley Quinn movies because of technically Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad would count as Harley Quinn movies. I mean, I'm not gonna nitpick it that hard.
interacting with each other. Different storylines that required all of them to come together. Instead, the entire House of Cards toppled with a string of 7 box office bombs, an attempted hostile takeover by an egotistical actor, mass desertion by the cast and crew, and some of the actors losing their goddamn minds. It understandably kept me up at night. Who did this? Who would allow this to happen? What god above would do this to us? Does anyone care at this point? I mean, because I care, I'm going to put on my Sherlock Holmes cap, and I think I've got it narrowed down to 7 key suspects, each owning some measure of failure, or in many cases just outright delinquent in their duties. The obvious cheat answer here is, of course, that all of these suspects are guilty, and all of them had a role to play in the DCU's untimely demise. But that's really not all that fun, and kind of seems like a cop-out. No, there is a real killer. So let's take a look back at who exactly.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the main answer is just quality, but he wants to make it a more entertaining video. Like, if they would have made better movies, they probably would have succeeded. So I respect that he kind of just, like, gets the obvious answer out of the way.
Killed the DCEU, beginning with suspect number 1, Zack Snyder.
Yeah, Zack is obviously the person that people jump to at first, but, like, at the end of the day, I don't think you can really blame Zack Snyder because he made his movies, right? And you hired him to make his movies. So even though his movies may not have connected with everybody, at least they were like pieces of art that you can attribute to an artist. I would argue that the downfall of the DCEU really started when they released that theatrical Justice League movie that was just this bizarre Frankenstein's monster of an abomination. And that's all to blame on retarded studio executives that are just desperately trying to please everyone, which is obviously going to end up pleasing nobody.
The first person brought on to kickstart the DCEU, he's seen as something of the captain of the ship, steering the universe's direction and serving as the caretaker for these characters. Snyder at this point still had a reasonably good reputation, as his comic book adaptations of both 300 and Watchmen, they still had many fans, and we did see early enthusiasm with him as the head of this universe. DC needed a strong start. They had already tried to create a shared universe with a disastrous Green Lantern, which underperformed and was largely just made fun of by, I guess, people like me. They needed...
Were they trying to make a shared universe with Green Lantern? I guess, maybe. I'm honestly not sure.
The second attempt to go well. When Marvel launched their own universe, they kicked things off in good form with a surprise hit of Iron Man, which made the character of Tony Stark, the actor Robert Downey Jr., and Marvel as a company all instant household names. 3 birds with 1 stone. Man of Steel, while not an outright reviled film like Green Lantern was, it certainly didn't enjoy the same warm reception by critics or the general audience that maybe Iron Man did. Zack Snyder decided that Man of Steel should be kind of the anti-Marvel. If Marvel was going to go for bright, pulpy fun, inspired kind of by Star Wars and Indiana Jones, DC would take the other route. They would go for melodrama and action epic. Snyder was very much trying to just ride the wave of Nolan's successful gritty Dark Knight trilogy. Nolan even served as an executive producer on this first film, which put a lot of eyeballs on the project and raised expectations to perhaps unachievable heights. Some criticized Man of Steel for its overly dour tone, poor attempts at Nolan's signature non-linear story structure, awkward pacing, and the injection of 9/11 imagery. Others thought Snyder in general just didn't understand the appeal of the titular character. Superman historically represents a brighter tomorrow, as they say.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like Man of Steel. I just think that the third act is just a little too bloated. I kind of get lost, or I start getting uninvested in the action because I just feel like the Kryptonian fights I think just go on for way too long. But I don't mind Man of Steel really at all, to be honest with you. I think it's perfectly fine. I don't really care that, like, oh, he's not making my version of Superman. It's like, I'm just not, I just don't consume art in that way where I'm like so protective of IP. Like, I think it's perfectly fine for an artist to take a property and make it its own thing, right? Like I simply don't have a problem with that, especially something like comic book IPs, which have so many different iterations of themselves already, right? Like you can have Superman, you can have Superman Red Sun, you can have Injustice Superman. It's like I never really had a problem with Zack Snyder making his own version of Superman. So anyways, that's just my 2 cents.
The S stands for hope.
In my world, it means hope.
Hope starts with an H, stupid.
The cynicism of this version became evident when, in the third act, Superman kind of accidentally, or I guess in some cases intentionally, destroys half a city and then kills a ton of people without really caring all that much. I mean, he basically has the ashes of the dead raining around him while he's making out with Lois Lane. For all he cares, humans on the ground, they're pretty much like insects, like little ants. And that's all before he barbarically murders the main villain with his bare hands. It didn't exactly leave people with that warm, fuzzy feeling that they came to expect from this character. Yet the movie has just as many defenders. People who love it for its grounded, realistic take. Hans Zimmer's pounding score, Snyder's just auteur style of capturing a comic book frame, and Cavill's pitch-perfect look for the character. And not to mention, in general, just making Superman look like a badass. This was not an outright failure, but it wasn't really a knockout of the park either. It slightly underperformed expectations at the box office, but it did still rope in a healthy 607.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, like that is perfectly fine box office. I don't people try to say that people try to like knock Man of Steel for the amount of money that it made. And it's like, sure, should it have probably made more when we were already in the comic book movie boom of a post Avengers, era, sure. But like at the end of the day, it's a financial success. And the thing that they probably should have been more worried about is just the fact that audiences were a little more divided than you maybe would have wanted them to have been.
$70 million. There was still enthusiasm behind this new franchise, and never more so than at the next Comic-Con, where they announced the sequel would pit The Dark Knight against The Last Son of Krypton.
Yeah, like let's be real. Like I think even people that didn't love Man of Steel, everybody was hyped for Batman v Superman. I mean, probably until The Batman, I don't think that I'd ever been more excited for a movie.
This was the movie that fans had been waiting for years. They were like over the top. They're going like, "Oh, rest in peace, Marvel. You're dead and buried." It only gained more hype when people realized that it was going to lead into not
Oh no, not the slate. Not the slate.
one, but 2 Justice League movies. Batman vs Superman would introduce most of the Justice League while also bringing in Superman's arch nemesis Lex Luthor. Oh, and everyone got all excited. Would it be Bryan Cranston, just because he played a bald guy once? No, it wasn't. It was Jesse Eisenberg playing a social media tech bro version of the character.
If you guys were the inventors of Facebook, you invented Facebook.
Here's where we get into likely Snyder's true failings as the lead of this entire universe. One that may get him placed behind bars for, dare I say it, murder. Warner Brothers trusted him with these characters, in the same way that Kevin Feige was trusted to bring the Marvel library to screen. Fans wanted to see these beloved characters modernized, but still very true to the source. The big problem here is, I'm not so sure Snyder ever cared about the source material. In an interview for Watchmen, Snyder claimed he didn't really like traditional superheroes at all. That's why he felt Watchmen was such a good fit for him. He once even claimed that
I had a buddy who tried getting me into normal comic books, but I was all like, no one is having sex or killing each other. This isn't really doing it for me. What? That's... Again, listen. Again, I don't care. I don't have a problem with Snyder doing his own thing. Like, at the end of the day, I think that's fine. But, like, it's just one of those things. I mean, this is obviously relevant today in 2024, where it's like, why would you admit this? Why would you say this? You're making a fucking Batman v Superman movie. Oh, well, to be fair, this is when he was directing Watchmen. Okay, fair enough. Maybe he didn't know that he was going to be directing Superman and Batman one day. So that's fine, I guess. But yeah, even if you're Warner Brothers, it's like, you're going to get the guy that apparently doesn't like Superman to direct a Superman movie. And not only direct a Superman movie, but to head your entire cinematic universe. But I guess to be fair, to be fair to Zack Snyder, you have to assume that Warner Brothers saw this quote and that they wanted this vision for the character, and that's why at the end of the day, like I don't blame Zack Snyder for the failure of the DCEU, because at the end of the day, they hired Zack Snyder to make a Zack Snyder movie, and they even hired Zack Snyder to make a Zack Snyder Justice League movie. And the studio had cold feet mid-production and tried to rework the Justice League movie into this just horrific mess of a film. And at the end of the day, they only have themselves to blame for that. A Zack Snyder directed Justice League would have been more successful than whatever the fuck they gave us. So
if he got to direct a Batman movie, he would have Bruce Wayne thrown in prison, and I guess the WB executives didn't really see that quote before giving him...
Wait, what? Everyone says that about Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. Batman's dark. I'm like, okay, no. Batman's cool. He gets to go to a Tibetan monastery and be trained by ninjas. Okay, I want to do that. But he doesn't, get raped in prison. that could happen in my movie. If you want to talk about dark, that's how that would go. What? That's so unhinged. What the? Why would you say that? Why would you ever say that? What the fuck? Okay, bro.
The full-time gig. That may have been a good thing to look into. Snyder was also quoted in interviews saying that he liked to deconstruct the classic idea of heroes.
I'm deep in Watchmen. I'm deep in deconstructing like superheroes. It's like, hey, you want to make a Superman movie? He's like, well, I'm about to tear him down, but I'm going to kill him. Right. I don't want to fixing him or making him interesting. He's the enemy right now.
But this universe was in its infancy. His characters were basically narrative babies. You have to build these characters up first before you can deconstruct them. Because of this, Snyder was often prone to stunt casting. Eisenberg was originally looked at for the role of Jimmy Olsen, but he ended up being wildly out of type for Lex Luthor. Probably a good thing for Eisenberg that he wasn't cast as Jimmy Olsen, because that character got shot in the head in the first 5 minutes of the extended cut. He didn't even make the theatrical. And why did Snyder kill Jimmy Olsen? Well, this was all because he considered the character outdated and ridiculous. Too cheesy even. And Jason Momoa was
You know, it's kind of interesting that... It's just kind of interesting. Like, I don't understand where he was like, well, we have to make Superman... Like, Superman is cheesy, so let's update him for the modern era. You couldn't update Jimmy Olsen for the modern era? Like, why not? That's such a weird route to go. Because, like, the problem with killing off Jimmy Olsen is that it's not even like a character that we care about that gets killed off tragically. Like, that could have worked. It's just like a random thing where he gets murdered at the beginning of the movie. And it's like, if you don't know who Jimmy Olsen is, it doesn't mean anything to you. Like, you don't care. And if you do know who Jimmy Olsen is, well, you haven't grown attached to this version of Jimmy Olsen, so you're just kind of confused. Like, it was just a bizarre decision.
originally auditioned for Batman for Bruce Wayne, but instead he ended up cast as this kind of, again, very out of type, just this bro Aquaman.
Riding over here. My man.
And then there's Superman, who became this cold and distant
My
alien, who sees
man.
the value of human lives, like this distant god, rather than a kid from Kansas who's been here and lived this life. Batman, he probably got the really short end of the stick. He became a mass-murdering sociopath who uses guns, blinds criminals with his car, and brands prisoners so they can later be shivved in prison. Flash was made hyperactive and autistic, while Cyborg, most well-known for Titans and his upbeat catchphrase.
This is a funny way to describe the Ezra Miller Flash. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
We'd love to say, but there's no place to sit. Oh, yeah, good.
he's now turned into just this tortured, tragic soul, basically Frankenstein's monster.
I'm a monster!
To be completely honest, he was mostly here because the producers probably looked at each other and went, you know, we need someone like Iron Man, who in our pantheon is kind of, sort of, squint your eyes, a little bit like Iron Man. In the end, Snyder was never the great caretaker WB had hoped for, and with each movie, he alienated more viewers. Where Man of Steel was met with this mixed response, Batman v Superman was largely panned for its meandering pace, nonsense Lex Luthor plan, and a third act that pretty much made you feel like you were having a seizure.
Save Martha! Why did you say that name?
Add in a higher
Yeah, it's just so much of it just isn't handled all that well. Don't by the way, don't get into an argument with a Zack Snyder fan, okay? Here's the thing, right? You can dislike this movie, and those feelings can be valid. Again, I have to rewatch Man of Steel and Batman v Superman one day, but like, you know, I like Man of Steel, but I don't really like Batman v Superman all that much. But it's like, trying to like debate a Snyder bro is like trying to debate a flat earther, where it's like, this is all that they think about.
itself is just smarter than the
They don't watch other movies. They don't consume other pieces of media. They just like, okay, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. It's like they know like every single argument that you could possibly make, and they have like their own autistic explanations for it. When like at the end of the day, when you're watching the movie, if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's like every now and then on Twitter, I'll see like Snyder bros because they pay for Twitter Blue, and they have just like this 5-paragraph fucking essay explaining why the Martha scene works actually.
ever was, and it put off a lot of viewers. Professional critics, meanwhile, they dogpiled on that dark tone in particular. This caused WB just to have this complete panic attack and wring their hands over ongoing productions. Justice League, it was supposed to follow with this tone. We know this thanks to the Snyder Cut, which, for the most part, carries on the same self-seriousness. Though his cut of the Justice League is far better than the theatrical one, it was still overly bloated at 4 hours long, and is still to blame for a lot of the awkward characterization choices that were found in the canon theatrical version. Snyder liked non-superhero movies.
Oh god, Jared Leto Joker. Oh no.
It's just a fact. Movies where heroes are revealed to be flawed gods trying to fit in with our world. That's not a bad direction for DC to go in. I can't remember who said it, but I once heard Marvel is about humans trying to become heroes, and DC is about gods trying to be human. I've always thought that's a really great and smart separation. This could have worked brilliantly, but the scripts, they just never really supported Snyder or his killer eye for visuals. His mission to make everything as epic as it could often come off as almost immature or clumsy. His attempts to deconstruct characters before they had even been constructed, this all just felt cynical. Yet his guidance did have some artistic and narrative coherence, especially compared to what they ended up doing later on. In the end, I can hardly blame Snyder for the demise of this project as a whole, especially when he was removed from Justice League mid-filming. At first, it was reported that he left himself due to the brutally tragic death of his daughter, but later it was revealed that he was actually forcibly removed by WB, all because they had gotten cold feet regarding the overall.
Is that true? I actually don't ever remember hearing that WB like actually removed him. I honestly don't. I never saw like that being reported.
The franchise. Again, all due to the critics singling out the dark aesthetic. I wouldn't even put that as one of the top 10 problems. I put probably even the title higher than that. That's always driven me crazy. Why is it just a V? Are they going to court? Who did this? Who made this decision? Snyder would leave the franchise without ever getting to make his part 2 of Justice League. Hell, he didn't even get to finish.
Oh god, the fucking pee bottle. Oh my god, so many just bizarre decisions in Batman v Superman are flashing. I'm having Vietnam flashbacks.
One of Justice League. Reshoots were instead handed off to director Joss Whedon, who was tasked with entirely retooling the movie to meet the executive's wants and needs. And that brings us to suspect number 2, Joss Whedon.
But there is at least one true.
Yeah, I don't think you can really blame Joss Whedon. Like, like if we're being real, he probably did the best that he could do with having to like Frankenstein's monster a separate movie from what Zack Snyder had already shot, while I would imagine also having to deal with a bunch of studio mandates. Like, I also wouldn't blame Joss Whedon to be perfectly honest with you.
Guilty party behind it all committed a heinous crime of selfish intent.
Only 2 years previously, Joss Whedon had been enjoying the high point of his career. He had helped bring the MCU to a climatic triumph in 2001.
Why would he even agree to do it, though?
Perhaps less well-received, but equally successful Age of Ultron. Both became 2 of the highest-grossing films ever. And the Warner Brother executives, they were drooling at the idea of getting their little mitts on a bit of that money. They wanted their own Avengers, and they were going to do anything to get it. Every single thing they had done up to this point was all to the sole purpose of cooking up.
Probably a lot of money. They probably paid him a lot of money.
A billion-dollar team-up movie. As they lost faith in Snyder's ability to execute on that goal, they pivoted and quickly traded him out. Undoubtedly, WB was thinking, who better to make an Avengers movie than the very man who made the Avengers? What? It's genius. What could go wrong? A whole lot, apparently. There was a big glaring problem here that anyone with half a brain cell could have spotted. Whedon and Snyder's styles, they were completely incompatible. Water and oil, yin and yang. You could not find 2 more polar opposite filmmakers if you tried. Snyder was self-serious and grandiose. He liked things to feel big and epic, and paid more mind to making his frames appeasing, often or sometimes to the detriment of characters or story. But all his shots felt very purposeful, and his tone larger than life. He wanted to go for that melodrama. Whedon, on the other hand, came from a TV background, and his movies sort of looked like, well, TV, but he made up for it with an entertaining tongue-in-cheek tone, witty dialogue, and stories that hinge on interpersonal conflict. This was great for ensemble dynamics. Trying to get Whedon to build off Snyder's foundation, it's like asking Picasso to paint over Da Vinci. It doesn't matter how good your artists are. These could have been the greatest directors on the face of the planet, and their styles still would never gel. The result was a real Frankenstein's monster, pulled between 2 directors in a game of tug-of-war. The film was shot for Snyder's planned darker color grading, but when you jack up that exposure, the costumes and sets...
Yeah, it's so bizarre. It's just... The theatrical cut of Justice League is genuinely, like, one of the most bizarre, nonsensical... Like, it's one of the worst movies of all time, just because of how... just non-cohesive, non-art, like, it's like anti-art, you know? Like, when I want to consume a piece of art, I just want to see the vision of an artist. Like, I don't even care that much if I don't really connect with it. Like, I'll always appreciate, like, Zack Snyder doing his own wacky thing with Superman and you know, and the DC characters. So it's like, I don't hate Man of Steel or Batman v Superman, even if, like, Batman v Superman specifically doesn't really work for me. But I'll take that any day over some weird court studio mandated nonsensical farce that is the fucking theatrical cut of Justice League.
All look extremely tacky and ugly. It didn't help that the entire finale, they decided for some reason to put it all in just this ugly orange tint. Characters like the villainous Steppenwolf were completely redesigned last minute into horrifying monstrosities that look more at home on a PS2 than, you know, a big blockbuster with millions of dollars.
Wait, oh yeah, they did do that.
All look extremely tacky and ugly. It didn't help that the entire finale, they decided for some reason to put it all in just this ugly orange tint. Characters like the villainous Steppenwolf.
I forgot about that. They like weirdly redesigned his face. Like, why?
Into horrifying monstrosities that look more at home on a PS2 than, you know, a big blockbuster with millions of dollars dumped into it. Lots of the Whedon-esque quippy, goofy comedy was added, but it all felt really off next to the darker, more dour moments.
Yeah. Oh, something's definitely bleeding.
The movie was completely, I was going to say trimmed down, but the more accurate phrase would be slashed to pieces. In pursuit of a leaner runtime, a lot of character development, arcs, and world building, these were all left on the cutting room floor. Again, much to the chagrin, or I guess temper tantrums, of the actors that were having to perform. It's very sad, I'm sure it was hard. The result then was that this movie struggled to even break even. With a cost around $300 million plus marketing, Justice League barely made $660 million. When you factor in marketing budget with that, this was not the box office triumph that WB had been chasing. It was a complete backfire and just outright embarrassment. Whedon seemed like he injected zero of his own passion into this project. He treated this gig like he was just a hired gun, which, let's be honest, he was, but it was never his own baby. It wasn't like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Avengers. He felt no real personal attachment to it, and the lack of care came across in the final product. He, of course, Whedon had found himself in hot water. He'd once been revered as as this director who was a champion of feminism, but now somehow he become a icon for toxic masculinity.
I hate feminists. Is this a good time to bring that up?
This was all made worse when actor Ray Fisher came out against his behavior on set and made it a personal vendetta to take him down. WB, I guess, didn't appreciate this gesture of nuking their multi-million-dollar movie and retaliated by torching Fisher's entire career. But he wasn't the only one. Affleck, he looked noticeably checked out when you compare the original scenes to the new ones that were shot. And then it's hard to deny.
Yeah, I never looked into the Joss Whedon stuff. I never looked into like anything that Ray Fisher said, so I'm not gonna say anything about it.
How the Justice League failing, it just took the wind out of their sails. It was meant to be their Avengers, and it falling flat, it just made the entire next phase of the DCEU feel completely directionless, with no real future destination. They definitely needed to carve out a new identity for themselves to survive. I mean, it didn't, clearly, because it's dead now, but it also ran up against an all-new disaster that froze all social entertainment across the entire United States. That's right, I'm talking about the dreaded plague. Suspect number 3, the plague.
Bring out your dead. I'm not dead. He said he's not dead.
Yes, he is.
I feel happy.
And yeah, I will be calling it the plague to avoid that dreaded YouTube gods coming down and smiting my poor little 8K channel. You can help that, of course, by liking and subscribing. I'm just a little guy.
I'm too afraid to get out.
Is that still a thing in 2024? Can you not say the thing? I feel like you can, right? You can openly talk about it. I mean, if he's not going to do it, I guess I won't do it either, because not that this channel is even is even monetized, but you know, whatever.
That's it, Miguel. I'm winning.
You make us bigger. That should help. When the outbreak hit the United States, movie production was shut down and theaters closed. The plague could not have come at a worse time for the DCEU. The franchise had just taken a mallet to the knees with Justice League, and now had to find something new that would excite the masses, despite, the masses being unable to even go to their movie or go to the theater at all. They decided instead of taking new risks, they would instead chase previous successes. The first Wonder Woman was probably their most lauded film, and Gal Gadot's take was well received across the board. What she didn't have in acting, people felt she made up for it with natural charisma, and probably some good looks. That was hope too. And I'd say, for the most part, I agree.
I'm gonna disagree. Okay, listen. I'm a Gal Gadot hater, okay? She can't act, okay? You may, like, a bunch of you people call her a Zionist or whatever. I genuinely could not care less about any of that shit. She's just a bad actress, and I will be a hater forever and ever.
Usually.
No.
The first Suicide Squad, it crashed and burned quickly. I'm personally of the opinion that it's one of the worst examples I've ever seen of momentary and structural editing for a big budget feature film. But you can go see Fully Ideas video on that. He absolutely killed it. No one's gonna do it any better. This movie really should be taught in film schools on what not to do. Suicide Squad, it still made money though, and that's really what's important to the Warner Brothers executives. Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn was especially singled out as a high point. The Suicide Squad's production overall, yeah, it was another train wreck. Yes, the producers for some ungodly reason had decided, hey, let's take the movie away from our director and hand it to a trailer team to try and edit, just so they can try and capture the tone that they marketed in the trailers. Again, they were scared of that.
Yeah, everybody's they want the David Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, which honestly I wouldn't mind seeing one day. James Gunn, give it to us. I want to see it.
Tone, and they want to strip it all away and try and pitch this as more like it's Guardians of the Galaxy. Except it's not. It wasn't shot that way, and it was never meant to be. And you can only trick the audiences so much. So when they went to go do the sequel, who better to replicate that success of Guardians than the man who made the Guardians movies? Are you starting to see a pattern yet? And I'm going to give them credit where credit's due. Building on things that worked, that's not a bad strategy. That's actually usually a good strategy. Even though it did make it feel like DC was kind of prioritizing these B-list characters over their mainstays. Now that I think about it though, even Aquaman, it made a ton of money, and even it came out as this afterthought. And that was one of the biggest successes of the entire franchise. It made over $1 billion. The only movie to do so. Yet it still took 5 years to get a sequel. Shazam, likewise, did modest numbers, but its sequel was put off again for about 5 years, despite the concept being a kid who transforms into an adult. But that doesn't work as well when the kid is like 20 years old. Gee, it makes you wonder, why did the sequel flop? It's almost like our concept got blown up. Back to the plague. All hell did break loose. Theaters closed, social distancing was enforced, and many theaters, they shuttered their doors forever. It didn't help that the quality of the DCEU films, they were as usual unreliable and kind of all over the place. Wonder Woman 1984 was regarded as one of the worst of the entire DCEU. And that is saying something. It was a massive disappointment compared with the first, with bad action scenes, a corny 80s tone, hammy villains, and a half-baked plot. Many also went the extra mile and accused the
I don't even know. I genuinely am so confused as to what Patty Jenkins was even thinking making this movie. Because that's the thing, like, you can blame, like, studio executives meddling for Justice League, but I don't even know that that was a factor here. Like, this feels like a director had an idea for a movie. It was just the wrong one.
of sexual impropriety, so that wasn't great. Birds of Prey was really kind of mixed reception. Sorry, did I say Birds of Prey? I meant Birds of Prey, the wonderful, not lengthy title that shoehorns in the emancipation of one Harley Quinn, or whatever it was. It was a competently made film, but a complete, just kind of bastardization of the source material. So you didn't win over a lot of the fans. It suffered more than anything from a marketing campaign that seemed dedicated to not making money. I don't know why. I mean, they tried to correct midstream. They even changed the
I mean, like, what do you mean by bastardizing the source material? I don't even know what that means. Oh, I guess some of the characters, I think, aren't like they are in the comics. What's the... Oh, gosh, I'm remembering now. There was the girl character, I guess she might be different in the comics or whatever. I don't know. I honestly, I don't even think that the movie itself is the problem. I just think that Harley Quinn might not be as popular of a character as as some people seem to think she is, because the reality is that I think Harley Quinn is a generally well-liked character, but she's not necessarily a character that can, like, head her own franchise. Like, I think Harley Quinn definitely played a role in why the Suicide Squad was not the Suicide Squad, why Suicide Squad was a success, but I think it's like I think audiences wanted to see Harley and Joker. I think audiences wanted to see Harley and Will Smith. So that's not to say that she didn't play into its success at all, but I don't think that Harley by herself is going to make audiences run to the theater. And the movie itself, I think, is like fine, but I'm not surprised that it didn't get like super great word of mouth, because it's also just not that exciting of a film in general.
Title to Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, something that people could actually say. But the damage was already done. The Suicide Squad was by far one of the best movies produced for the franchise, thanks to Gunn just being a confident director. But again, the marketing failed to separate it from the original, all the way down to that title. Again, we can't get past the title on these even. The titles were almost exactly the same. I know people were unaware there was a second movie because it was just named the exact same thing. It also suffered from being just guilty by association.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Very, very heavily disliked first movie. And quality aside, there was another tiny little problem here. How was anyone going to go watch this movie? All three got hit hard by the plague and were released straight to streaming on HBO Max the very same day that they hit a very limited.
Oh, really? Was Birds of Prey released around COVID? Sorry, I said it. Oh, I didn't even realize that. Interesting. Yeah, I never associated Birds of Prey with COVID.
Limited number of theaters. See, Warner Brothers here, their strategy had been to use the day-and-date release to instead generate interest in their streaming service, HBO Max, all while eating massive losses. The result was that all three movies just completely flopped. This natural disaster combined with the largely lackluster films, this set the stage for just a string of DCEU flops. In fact, Aquaman and Shazam, which went, again, so long just being ignored, they ironically would end up being the last true profitable films of the franchise. All others would flop or claw their way to break even. The gas in the DCEU tank was completely empty at this point. Yet WB, they were confident there was one man who could turn it all around. The man, the myth, the legend. Yes, I'm talking about suspect number 4, The Rock.
Now, what you're going to see here is why the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
And The Rock did
That's never not going to be funny.
completely change the course of the DCEU, just not in the way he wanted or expected. To me, The Rock's role in the DCEU could be considered nothing short of a hostile takeover, an attempt to take a franchise that was treading water, or I guess in this case, kind of almost drowning, and then promise a complete rebrand in his own image. Statues would be erected in his honor. Literally. Dwayne Johnson was extremely hands-on with the production of Black Adam, and believed its success was basically a foregone conclusion. He immediately started to plan new spin-offs and expansions before it even hit theaters. I'm not even convinced yet that he cared about the first movie. It seemed like it was just a means to an end. He seemed laser-focused on getting to what he really wanted, which was a chance to personally beat up Superman on the big screen. That seems about right for his ego. He seemed almost unaware that his character was not actually a Superman villain, but a Shazam villain. In fact, he wasn't just a Shazam villain, he was his arch nemesis. The Rock had no interest in that. Okay, not any whatsoever. Despite being part of that franchise,
Yeah, it's just so yeah, the whole thing of like The Rock not wanting to be in Shazam, or not wanting Shazam to be in his movie, it's just so shitty. It's like, dude, you're playing Black Adam. You are playing a Shazam villain. Like, what do you... Like, nobody's even saying that you can't fight Superman one day in a movie. But you're like, not to diminish you or anything, but you are Shadow the Hedgehog. You need to be in the Sonic movie before we can think about spinning you off into a Shadow spinoff. You know what I mean?
he acted like he was above it all. It's like he only chose Black Adam as a character solely because someone showed him a picture of him, and he said, hey, that kind of looks like me.
I always gravitated towards Black Adam because he was one of the few who looked like me.
I guess WB had a lot of faith in him, though, because they decided to burn $260 million on a movie that was nothing more than a vanity project. It lost a reported $110 million. It even had the goal to drag poor Henry Cavill out of retirement. He had retreated from DC due to a frustration over the reshoots for Theatrical Justice League, where he was completely embarrassed and ridiculed for a CGI lip that had to hide a mustache he had grown for Mission Impossible. He was equally frustrated that there had been no...
Oh my god, the mustache. I forgot about the mustache. Oh my god, there's just so much wrong with DCEU. I mean, that's the thing. That's why, like, I know, you know, we could all have sympathy for Henry Cavill and how, you know, they thought he was coming back, or he thought he was coming back to be, to hang out with The Rock and whatnot, but, like, you can't even blame James Gunn for just wanting to start fresh. Like, you really can't. Like, when you look at everything that he was working with, I can't blame Gunn.
No development on a promised Man of Steel sequel. Dwayne Johnson was the one who was successful getting Cavill back in the studio and in tights to film a post-credit scene, all to promise a movie that would be a showdown between Black Adam and Superman. Cavill also made this equally embarrassing social media post about how excited he was to finally return.
I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman and also Black Adam.
Oh no!
It's a very small case of things to come, and thank you for your patience.
Oh no!
I promise to be avoided.
But he didn't. He didn't return. Nobody did. They're all gone. The negative reviews for Black Adam and the bad box office return, this meant that Dwayne Johnson's big dreams for his wing of the DCEU, they were effectively dead. Most found his character one note and boring. His movie kind of looked like dirt, and most of the plot felt aimless with twists you could see from a mile away. To add insult to injury, WB again told Cavill they had no plans for him and he was shuffled off to The Witcher, where Netflix then proceeded to treat him about as well as DC did. A complete waste of an actor that was passionate about the character and never got the chance to truly shine.
I mean, to be fair, didn't Cavill? I think Cavill like voluntarily left The Witcher, didn't he? Like from what I remember hearing, I've never seen The Witcher. Okay, I tried watching for like the first episode for like 15 minutes and I got bored. Okay, don't get mad at me. But didn't he like voluntarily leave The Witcher because he didn't like the script, which is like fine, that's his right. But I don't know that you can really say that The Witcher mistreated him. You know what I mean?
Shine. And just for the record, I'm talking about both The Witcher and Superman. Both of them. Back to the rock, no, I don't think he killed the DCEU. I don't think he was ever as important as he thought he was. Despite all his grandstanding and bluster, he really was hardly more than a footnote. Hell, when I mention this movie to people, they seem genuinely surprised that it exists. Or they'll go like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember seeing a trailer for that once, I think. The DCEU was on a fast track with no brakes. Its momentum and destination at this point, I think it's pretty inevitable. It was going for gone. And The Rock wasn't even the actor that caused them the most problems. No, there was another actor who infamously stole his spotlight. And no, I'm not talking about Amber Heard from Aquaman, who got caught up in this domestic abuse scandal with her ex-husband Jack Sparrow. Although I'm sure this big public court case didn't really help either. Many fans did see her actions as basically being the equivalent of Gone Girling Depp. But we're not gonna get into that. She was never important, even less so than The Rock. No, we're talking about suspect number 5, Ezra Miller.
Hello, I'm Patrick Stewart. I believe in helping.
You're not trying to draw psycho pigeon. You really are crazy.
At this point, the DCEU was once again this lost core ship without a captain. But there was one comforting constant in its total existence through all of time. A promise that a Flash movie will and always has been in development. Now, a Flash movie, it goes back a long ways. It had been in development hell as early as 2011. It was originally supposed to be a sequel to Green Lantern in their first attempt at the shared universe.
Yeah, I think isn't it the case that I don't think it's as simple as this. I think but like for effectively in the time it took them to make the Ezra Miller Flash movie, the CW Flash TV show like ran for like 11 seasons. I think that's the case, right? Like they literally had an entire Flash TV show in the time that it took them to make a Flash movie. That's embarrassing. What's even more embarrassing is the movie that we actually ended up getting.
Flash was officially added to the DCEU lineup with a set date of 2017. Much like the joke that the fastest man alive is always late, the movie would not arrive until 6 years later in 2023. Its development was complete and utter chaos. Studio meddling led to countless talented filmmakers leaving the project. Here's all the creators who signed on or were about to sign on and decided to bail. Okay, you had David S. Goyer, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, Seth Graham Smith, Rick I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your last name. I'll look it up later. I'm sorry, Rick. We'll get back to you. Robert Zemeckis, Matthew Vaughn, and Dalian Goldstein. Okay, you had like 8 different directors go through this thing. Finally, they found Andy Muschietti, who had the stomach, the tolerance to stay long enough to actually put some image to celluloid. The Flash was going to be loosely based on Flashpoint, and this entire story, the script had gone through like so many people, so many iterations. It was the personification of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, I also don't know that I really blame Andy Muschietti for the Flash, to be honest with you, because it's like, he's had to work with so much past nonsense. You know for a fact that studio executives were sticking their grubby little fingers in the pot with that movie as well. It's like, I don't know, like. I mean, obviously, is it a knock on his career? Yes. Does it make me not want to see him direct Brave and the Bold? Yes. But at the end of the day, can I really say that he's responsible for the Flash being bad? Honestly, no.
It not only had to get a screen, a seemingly monumental, just impossible task to accomplish, it also had to, in and of itself, reset the entire DCEU. Okay? It's exhausting. Warner Brothers had planned it as a springboard to the next phase of storytelling, a master plan to introduce a multiverse arc that would culminate in the famous DC story, Crisis on Infinite Earths. They'd even filmed a post-credit scene with Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton returning as 2 separate Batmen. These scenes, I don't need to tell you again, never saw the light of day. But the real anvil around the production's neck was none other than the lead star, Ezra Miller, who decided now of all times, was as good as any to dive right off the deep end. Ezra Miller had been another controversial pick for the role of Barry Allen, another choice by Snyder to depict the Flash as this fast, hyperactive kid who maybe possibly is a little on the spectrum. And I'm not making fun of that choice because I actually think that's not a bad creative choice. You can go somewhere with that. But it did rub a lot of fans the wrong way, and many found him to be very grating and irritating. Miller was still one of the it actors. That promise became a liability with a long string of scandals involving assaults on women, arrests in Hawaii, accusations of grooming and child kidnapping.
Yeah, it's so weird that, like, to be clear, like, Warner Brothers ignored all of that stuff for such a long time. Like, he assaulted a woman outside of that bar, and Warner Brothers just said, shh, shh, don't mention it. And because they didn't address the problem head on at first, and Ezra Miller didn't face any repercussions for the first incident, it's like, yeah, no shit. He's just going to keep on doing a bunch of shit when nobody's really stopping him.
Further accusations of trying to start a cult with himself as like Jesus figure, I guess, leaving guns and ammunition around children, and much, much more. Okay, just an endless list of just like bad stuff you really don't want in, news.
I will say, I don't I didn't follow the whole cult thing that closely, so I'm not too sure how much of that actually happened, and like, did it even go to court? I'm honestly not sure. Well, I'm not saying I'm not saying it's not real or anything, but I just didn't follow that too closely.
In circulation. In this instance, I actually find myself pitying the WB executives a little, not much. David Zaslav, I think at this point was the owner of WB, and my empathy for him is very, very limited. But we'll get to more on that later. Back to our ship analogy. The DCEU now had a bunch of holes in it, and they were desperately trying to patch them all. And who can blame them in this case? I mean, there were rumors that they would scrap the entire film and write it off for taxes, just like they did for Batgirl. The problem is, with so much money dumped into development and reshoots, The Flash had ballooned to the outrageous budget of about $300 million. Okay, that's crazy. They were going to try and salvage it.
By the way, I'm just gonna say this. I actually don't think that. I don't think that them scrapping Batgirl for like a tax write-off is a bad move. If the movie is as bad as they claim it is, right? And to be fair, I kind of have a hard time believing that it really was that bad, because it's directed by the guys who directed the two most recent Bad Boys movies, which are pretty enjoyable. And they also directed some episodes on Miss Marvel, which I really like their episodes of Miss Marvel. If I think I want to say that's one of the earlier ones. Maybe the last episode, I think. Either way, Miss Marvel is a pretty well directed show. It's just kind of messy in the script department. So I have a hard time believing that they would have delivered a horrible project. But let's just say that that's true, right? That Batgirl was this horrible movie. If that's the case, I can't say that I really blame them for scrapping the movie and getting the tax write-off. like people will say that, like, but for the sake of art and preserving art, you should release a film that is going to flop and damage your franchise. And it's like no, bro. Like they have an entire cinematic universe to worry about. It's absolutely fine for them to make strategic decisions like that.
Therapy. They even tried to trick the audiences into thinking this was all, a Batman movie, and had nothing to do with The Flash. There were even more outrageous rumors of them digitally replacing him in every scene with Grant Gustin, who played the CW version of the character. And I kind of wish they had, mostly because he seems like a likable guy, not somebody who's gonna, beat up women, kidnap children, or start a cult. Please don't, Grant. I mean, don't prove me wrong now. The idea of digitally replacing Miller was a pipe dream to begin with. This could not have happened to a worse film, because Miller played not one, not two, but kind of three characters, replacing him with
That's true.
And costly task. And this was already well over budget, with no hope of making it back, and it didn't. I mean, not even with Keaton basically being put right front and center in those posters. It made only $270 million against its reported over-budgeted $300 million.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In truth, Ezra Miller may have very well been the person who actually deserves conviction. And I mean that both metaphorically and literally. The Flash crashed and burned, and it became the straw that broke the camel's back. DC would have to recast the role if they were ever going to use Barry Allen in the future. And that would only just cause more bad press. Even worse, the Flash completely derailed their plan for Crisis on Infinite Earths. The ending of the movie was reshot, so Barry, rather than meeting Keaton and getting this weird warding from Affleck in another universe, instead, Barry becomes marooned in the Batman and Robin universe and just trapped there with George Clooney, I guess. I can't think of a more deserving fate. And I'm serious, this is likely what finally made DC throw in the towel. They finally saw...
By the way, can we talk about how James Gunn just completely lied about The Flash? I mean, first of all, I don't... what did he say? He said something like, The Flash is the greatest comic book movie of all time. And it's like, you're a liar, James Gunn. I don't believe that you think that, first of all. But also, he straight up said that The Flash was going to, like, reset the timeline. Or he may not have said that specifically, but he definitely said something to the effect of The Flash was going to set up the DCU going forward. And that was just a complete lie. Like, no, it didn't. It's just like, it did not do that at all.
was a universe that they could not salvage. And that brings us to the man who actually put the knife to the franchise's throat. Certainly no one on this list could possibly be more responsible for murder than James Gunn. So suspect number 6, James Gunn.
I have a plan. You've got a plan. I have part of a plan.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's actually kind of a good point, right? Like, James Gunn quite literally killed the franchise at the end of the day when he decided not to continue it.
The small indie filmmaker that rose from Slither to become one of Marvel's biggest directors with Guardians of the Galaxy, then was fired from Marvel, hired by DC, delivered one of their best reviewed movies but one of their biggest flops, only then to be rehired by Marvel for Guardians 3, before DC then fully successfully stole him away for the DC reboot.
By the way, like, I know people like to shit on David Zaslav, and, you know, I understand why people really dislike him for how he, like, does, like, what's the proper term for what he does, where he kills projects in order to get tax breaks. I understand why people really don't like that, but I do think that one of the things that you have to give him credit for is for being more thoughtful than the old Warner Brothers studio executives where that were so reactionary that they would be like, people don't, or like Batman v Superman didn't make $1 billion, and people it's kind of divisive. Let's take Justice League away from Zack Snyder and make this shitty ass studio mandated movie. Do it, White Whedon. We'll give you $100 million. Please do it for us. Right? Like, what did David Zaslav do? The Suicide Squad comes out, fucking bombs. He's not reactionary like the old executives were, right? He recognizes that it may not have made money, but it was a really good movie. The people that watched the Suicide Squad really liked it. And James Gunn is clearly a guy that's really well knowledgeable about the subject, right? The DC as a whole. He's passionate about it, right? He wants to make these movies. And even though his movie bombed, I think he's the right guy to head DC. And I think you got to give Zaslav credit for not being as reactionary and for just like making an intuitively smart decision.
It's been a wild ride for James Gunn. This entire string of events would only really serve to make him more powerful than ever.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you could possibly imagine.
James Gunn had delivered 2 big wins for the DCEU. Sort of. Kind of wins. The Suicide Squad was one of their best received movies. Even though it was a box office failure, they acknowledged it was mostly due to poor marketing and The Plague. Peacemaker, on the other hand, ended up being a good-sized hit for HBO Max. It showed the executives over at Warner Brothers that maybe it was this guy. This is the guy to steer the franchise into calmer and more profitable waters.
That's true. Peacemaker was just a straight-up success for them.
Another hitch, a little problem in their plan. Gunn took one look at this half-sunken ship and said, no thank you. He basically told him if he was going to come on board, this whole thing would have to be rebuilt from the start with his producing partner, Peter Safran. In Gunn's eyes, the DCEU was damaged beyond repair. A Superman who was burned way too many times and didn't want to return. He didn't trust them. A Batman who passed up directing his own movie and also felt burned. Affleck had only returned for a very small role in The Flash, and that was it. He was promised for nothing else. Then you had a Flash actor who had lost his damn mind. A cyborg who had been blacklisted for the studio for speaking out about internal executive actions. It was just a mess. Their whole Justice League was basically poof into the air. The only people still there was Aquaman and Wonder Woman, okay? That's not Justice League, that's a Justice coupling. The entire franchise at this point was mired by just countless scandals, bad films, empty promises, and fleeing artists, and more. There's way more than I can possibly cover in this video. There's just one clear solution, and it was one of Hollywood's favorites: reboot. The DCEU would be scrapped, and in its place, a new DCU would be built, starting with a new Superman movie directed by James Gunn himself. That must have really stung for poor Henry Cavill, who just been sitting by his phone.
Well, kind of. Technically, it started with Creature Commandos, but yeah, sure.
The entire time just staring at it, probably going like, will they call me? Is it time? Has my time come? Your time has not come, and it will not be coming. I'm sorry. This new start was called Superman Legacy, and it was strangely announced, while there was still films that were on release schedule for the DCEU. These included Shazam 2, Blue Beetle.
Yeah, that's probably one of the worst decisions that James Gunn made. I feel like you probably just should have waited until The Flash is over to announce a slate. Like, I'm not going to say that Shazam and Blue Beetle and The Flash would have necessarily been these big successes if James Gunn didn't essentially render them pointless. But, like, it didn't help.
And Aquaman 2. This would effectively serve to kill any interest in these movies, as they now felt like they were just part of a dead franchise walking. All 3 would, say it with me again, horribly flop. It's all just adding itself to injury at this point. I mean, what was even the point of doing that? You could wait on an announcement like a couple months. So that's it then, right? James Gunn is the killer. He did it. No debate. But not so fast, because is this really a reboot? Well, yeah, but also, no, I guess. I don't know. You see, one of Gunn's weaknesses, or strengths depending on the situation, is his true passion for his projects. He is not a gun for hire. No pun intended there. He truly does love his work, both on Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. And by golly, he was not going to let them go down with the ship. As a result, their status, both in the DCEU old canon and this new DCU canon, I have no idea. It's a mangled mess. They're like in this weird Venn diagram. They're like the center for some weird reason.
So to be clear, basically the way that I understand it is a new canon. It is effectively a new canon. It's just that there's some returning actors playing their characters, and those characters are going to have some similar histories that sort of line up with the DCEU. So, to use MCU terminology, they're variants of the DCEU characters. And so, like, for Peacemaker Season 2, it's like, effectively, you can take Peacemaker Season 1 as kind of canon, with the exception of the Justice League stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything in the Suicide Squad happened the way that the Suicide Squad, plays out, right? Like, the only thing that you can take from the Suicide Squad is that Peacemaker killed Rick Flag Jr., right? Like, that happened. That happened in the history of the DCU. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything else in the Suicide Squad also happened. It's just that one specific thing that is going to be relevant to Peacemaker Season 2. So, listen, don't get me wrong. It is confusing, right? Even as I'm confusing it, even as I'm trying to explain it myself, I understand how confusing it sounds. But just to be clear, it is effectively a new canon. It's not necessarily the Venn diagram situation. It's more like It's more like two circles, but some of the dots are similar in both circles, but they're not crossing over.
Gunn has called them soft canon to the DCU. Even in Creature Commandos, which just came out, these properties are mentioned in that show as part of the new DCU canon. Look, I follow this stuff, and even I am a little like, I'm not sure what any of this means. It would be pretty easy just to say, hey, they were never part of the DCEU. They were always part of the DCU, okay? They're part of that canon. Except for, again, one little problem. Peacemaker has a cameo from the entire DCEU Justice League. That's...
Well, yeah, no, you can't say that, because in the Suicide Squad, you have Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. You know, you still have to deal with, like, Viola Davis. You know, they were in Suicide Squad, which is obviously a part of the DCEU, which then makes Jared Leto's Joker canon. Like, at the end of the day, the main criticism that you could give James Gunn is that you probably just should have started completely fresh with a new actors. Just don't do Peacemaker season 2. Scrap your Creature Commandos project. Like, sure, you could maybe have that criticism. But at the end of the day, it kind of goes back to the beginning of this video where I think as long as the content is good, I think a lot of this like canon discussion, I don't know that it's going to necessarily matter that much, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I think you should try to make your canon as consistent and as understandable as possible. Like, you should be trying to do that. But, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm currently watching Creature Commandos. And that's a really good show. I'm not going to sit here and be like, but the canon. It's like, that's not what I'm thinking about when I'm watching it, you know? Like, I freaking love Peacemaker Season 1. Am I really going to sit here and say that I'm upset that we're getting Peacemaker Season 2? Because maybe the canon, I guess, is going to be a little confusing? No. That's my perspective on it. But again, just to be clear, it is a new canon, right? Like, you effectively can toss the old stuff. The old stuff is no longer canon. It's just that there's some stuff in the new canon that is similar, right? Characters that have some similar histories to what happened in the DCEU. So there's that.
It's pretty hard to get around that. As excited as I am for Gunn's upcoming reboot, and I do think he's going to do great with Superman. I hope so. Stand by. But I also have to recognize how questionable it is for Gunn to just keep one hand on the wheel and the other on the rudder. Let's hope that he doesn't drive this whole thing into an iceberg. I'm using the ship metaphor a lot. This is really working out for me. I didn't intentionally do this, by the way. I guess I was thinking about boats for some reason.
You think you're so great because you have boats!
I follow this stuff, and I'm confused. And I'm thinking it's going to make a large amount of the audience approach this new universe with suspicion. Some under the impression that it's just still part of the old DCEU, and nothing has changed. So if James Gunn didn't kill the original DCEU, he may very well just kill his own DCU with this short-sighted choice. This brings up the question: if we found James Gunn in the library with a knife, why are we
I don't think so, because like at the end of the day, like, how many people in like the general audiences are paying attention to the canon discussions? Like, I think that if Superman were to come out and it was like Henry Cavill's Superman is still here, but we have a different actor for the Flash and whatnot, then I think those confusion, like, people would probably be more confused by that. But I think just the fact that it is a brand new Superman, right? Like, general audiences, they're going to be paying more attention to like your A-list characters, right? Like Superman. Having a new actor playing Superman, that says everything you need to know. That tells you that this is a new universe, right? Like, nobody was confused by the Batman because it was Robert Pattinson playing Batman. Like, that instantly tells you that it's a new universe. I think general audiences are smarter than we give them credit for. And I don't think that it'll end up being a problem at the end of the day.
Talking here. Okay, let's wrap it up, go home, save me some editing time. He is the killer. But again, hold up. We've got one more suspect to talk about, and that's suspect number 7, Marvel. Marvel was far more recognizable than DC at this point, and for those who knew DC, Marvel certainly had the better reputation. If Marvel was the murderer, it was a killer by comparison. Whenever a DC film came out, or whenever they made any kind of clumsy attempts at wider world building, it would always come back and be recompared to Marvel again. DC was starting from behind and playing a desperate game of catch-up. Why they felt they needed to play catch-up? I don't know. They should have been more focused on being their own thing, and not trying to do things the exact same way. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Marvel was all innocent either, okay? Marvel was actively engaged in counter-programming, intentionally setting up similar films and characters that the audience could then easily contrast with DC's offerings. I very much remember the bloodthirsty fan wars of 2016. DC and Marvel fans just at each other's throats. Marvel confidently was going into their third story arc with Phase 3, as DC was only only just getting started on their second film with Batman v Superman. So what was the reason for all this higher than normal fan tension? Also, why is there fan tension? I don't know. Fans like their stuff. Anyways, the reason for that tension? Counter-programming. After DC knocked the doors off Comic-Con with the announcement of Batman fighting Superman, Warner Brothers felt confident enough to schedule the film on the exact same week as Captain America 3. And how did Marvel respond to this? Not well. I mean, they mostly just dug in their heels. Feige, I guess, dumped a dump truck full of money on the Russo Brothers production studio so they could hire Robert Downey Jr. and turn Captain America 3 into Civil War. Captain America versus Iron Man, or Avengers versus Avengers.
I mean, I feel like this is a little too like conspiracy theory-ish. Like I don't think that Marvel decided to go in the direction of Civil War just because Batman v Superman was a thing. I don't think that was a thing. Again, maybe there were reports that reported this that I just didn't read or haven't read, I guess, but I just don't think that ever happened.
Avengers. Okay, it was the ultimate power play. All right, it was petty even in some ways, but hey, you got a good movie out of it. But DC, they now saw that they could not compete with that brand, and they lost their confidence and folded. This was a movie directly meant to be similar. It's like when Deep Impact released the same year as Armageddon, or Megamind the same year as Despicable Me. Don't be fooling yourself into thinking these are coincidences that just happen from time to time. It's a marketing tactic to draw attention to competing brands. Marvel was playing a very old game, and it wasn't their first time or last time. In return for Justice League Part 1 and 2 being announced, Marvel announced that Infinity War, it too now would be 2 films. In anticipation of Wonder Woman, Marvel then planned a Captain Marvel movie. Despite that character never catching on.
I don't know, man. I just don't think that it's that deep. Because like the thing that people forget as well is that Marvel doing well is good for DC and vice versa. Like comic book movies doing well is good for the genre. Like I don't know if he's going to bring this up, but I would argue that Marvel slipping in quality in post Avengers Endgame era also helped play a part in the DCEU being a failure. Like, I think that if people were as excited for Marvel movies as they were pre-Endgame, I think that some of that excitement would have also carried over into people giving movies like Shazam! Fury of the Gods and Blue Beetle and The Flash a chance. So, I don't know. This all just seems a little suspect to me. I don't know. Like he would have to like be. Whoa! What happened here? Oh no. Okay, sorry. It like disappeared for a second. I don't know. He would have to be linking articles here that report this for me to buy the idea that Marvel decided to change Captain America 3 just because Batman v Superman decided to release on the same day. Like, I just don't think that happened. Nor that they decided to make a Captain Marvel movie just because Wonder Woman came out.
In the comics the same way or to the same extent as Gal Gadot's female icon had. And then, when the DCEU signaled that their next big thing was to build a multiverse story with Crisis on Infinite Earths, what do you know? Marvel then countered that by saying, we too are doing our own multiverse story. If DC was going to do anything, Marvel was going to position itself to do it better. And when we're talking about the multiverse stories, the DCEU may have inadvertently lured Marvel into a trap. They've already abandoned this story concept, but Marvel is still stuck knee deep in it, and doesn't seem like it's going to be getting out anytime soon, as much as some of the fans would like it to. Marvel Studios and their universe, they were a juggernaut of the 2010s. Love them or hate them, they helped turn the superhero into the defining genre of that decade. Any comic movie was going to get compared to them. It just couldn't be helped. And the DCEU, it did suffer for it. The WB executives felt that pressure to compete and match what they were doing. It's the only reason that the DCEU even exists in the first place, because WB saw the profitability. It's in rushing to catch up that DC trips over its own legs. It was too much, too fast. One of the successes of the MCU is they took one full phase to set up all of their major characters as individuals, each with their own movie that established their wants, who they were, and what set them apart from the others, and also why people should care and come back to see them again. With that, they could then spin them off into other adventures, joint adventures, and people would catch on to different franchises through the individual characters. Not even Marvel has really taken this lesson to heart, as this new Infinity Saga has been really struggling to catch lightning in a bottle for a second time. And for DC, the message certainly didn't sink in. Batman v Superman was one big game of catch-up for them, okay? It's them trying to run a marathon in like 2 minutes. It was trying to introduce half the Justice League characters, and then the other half of the characters as just these characters on a flash drive. And then they had the plotline of The Dark Knight Returns, and then they had the death of Superman in there, then they had Doomsday in there, okay? It was just trying to do too much. There are these memes saying that if Marvel had made their first phase the exact same way DC had, it would have been Iron Man, then Civil War, then Guardians of the Galaxy, then Captain Marvel, then Avengers. Understandably, the Avengers likely would not have been as big of a hit if it was that lineup that set everything up. The accusation here basically is that DC died from envy. But let's get to the conclusion here, what you guys have all been waiting for. Who is the real killer?
Shot or kill?
Oh, it's restricted to kill, so we may have a manageable figure.
We have our 7 suspects. Zack Snyder, a man more interested in deconstructing his characters rather than building
What
them up.
is he gonna say? I think it's gonna be us, the audience, because we didn't go see the movies. Maybe. I'm not sure. I think it's gonna be that, or that's my prediction at least.
Whedon, a hired gun without passion, who botched their crown jewel, and in the end made people lose interest very early in this franchise. The Plague, an outbreak that no one saw coming that upset the industry. The Rock, an egotistical actor who tried to hijack the franchise. Ezra Miller, a mentally unstable lead who obliterated their final Hail Mary. And then James Gunn, who favored a reboot and really put the knife into the DCEU. And finally, Marvel, that counter-programmed and was a constant rival and reminder of what they weren't. Like I said at the beginning, they all had a role to play in the demise of this franchise. They all share blame in one way or another. But the real killer here is, when talking about every suspect, all 7 of them, I strangely kept bringing up someone or something over and over again. Yeah,
David
the
Zaslav?
WB producers. Let's think back to how this all began. Rewind.
Oh, yeah,
No,
okay.
It's not actually Man of Steel. It goes way further back than that. It all starts with Green Lantern. In 2011, Warner Brothers, they saw what Marvel was doing, and they were eager to get in on the action early. If they had, they may not have had to ever play catch up at all. Green Lantern became their answer to Iron Man. They had a charismatic, snarky lead with Ryan Reynolds, tried to replicate a similar tone, and tried to set up connections to lead into an extended universe. But alas, everybody hated it.
Oh yeah, I guess. Yeah, I can kind of see where he would be coming to this conclusion.
I know, right?
So it was a no-go, and so they pivoted. They instead decided to chase the Dark Knight trilogy and hire Zack Snyder to make a dark, epic universe to counter the lightweight fun of their rivals. When the critics, and to a lesser extent the audiences, rejected this vision, they pivoted again. They ripped both Justice League and Suicide Squad away from their creators. They tried to turn Suicide Squad into Guardians of the Galaxy, and Justice League into Avengers.
You really are on your mind.
I'm not the one who brought a pitchfork.
The result was 2 disasters, way worse than anything Batman v Superman did. I think they still could have recovered from the negative attitude towards Batman v Superman. I mean, they had a big hit in Wonder Woman, but not anymore. Not after they
The fuck when he put the fucking candy in his mouth. Oh, Batman v Superman is so weird.
also nuked 2 more movies. Then they foolishly ignored the successes of both Shazam and Aquaman and waited until the iron was cool to hit the sequels. By the time both arrived, no one really cared. Instead, they chose to prioritize streaming over theatrical releases during the Plague, which only hurt them even more. And they certainly weren't helped by the bad marketing during that period, effectively burying at least one of their best movies. They became completely lost and directionless. They had no central figure like Kevin Feige to steer a wider multiverse story. Instead, they flirted kind of between a commitment to known properties and smaller B films, which doesn't sound that bad, except they weren't focused in that. It was randomized. It was an endless string of various movie developments, and most of them never even saw the light of day. And just to give you a sense of how just sweeping their various, like, throwing stuff at the wall and trying to see if it sticks, let's just look at what was all in development, okay? You had a Harley Quinn vs. Joker movie, possibly, a Jared Leto Joker movie, Aquaman spin-off called The Trench, New Gods, a Wonder Twins movie, Man of Steel 2, you had Ben Affleck's Batman movie that eventually became The Batman, Black Adam vs. Superman, Green Lantern Corps, Lobo.
Yeah, like the fact that they never made Man of Steel 2 is so bizarre. Like, at any point between 2013 and I guess it would have been like 2023 when James Gunn took over, how they never bothered to make a Man of Steel 2 is so weird. Like, even if you don't bring back Zack Snyder and you bring in somebody to have like a lighter tone, it's just so weird that you never tried to make another Superman movie. And it's so weird that they never... Well, actually, that makes sense. Ben Affleck wanted out at that point. But yeah, the fact that they never tried to make another Batman movie as well is just weird. The fact that... Well, again, that part isn't weird because Ben Affleck was going through all his own issues. But yeah, there's really no reason why you couldn't make a Henry Cavill Superman movie in the midst of all this.
Cyborg solo movie, that was actually on their full chart. Justice League Part 2, Gotham City Sirens, Deadshot, Deathstroke, Supergirl, a Themyscira movie, Crisis on Infinite Earths. You see, I ran out of fingers here. Batman Beyond, possibly even. Okay. Wonder Woman 3, and about 14 different versions of an unproduced Flash movie. They were completely everywhere in scattershot and just unfocused in building a connected universe. This is not how you do it. You need character arcs and story arcs that all get to cross over into various franchises. And while all this was happening, the independent standalone movies like The Joker and Reeves the Batman, they were actually raking in real returns and getting great reviews, which was showing that maybe, hey, the big universe thing, maybe it's not what it's all cracked up to be. And even when they had finished products, the turnover and ownership of the studio and leadership, this caused some executives, one in particular, to decide to literally delete everything, all the blood, sweat, and tears of artists for just an easy tax break. Batgirl was already in the can. It featured the return of Michael Keaton even, but that didn't save it from being deleted. Marvel succeeded for one reason: forward vision. Kevin Feige may now be struggling to replicate his early successes, but none can deny he is perhaps the most influential producer since maybe Walt Disney himself. I can't really point to another producer that's as hands-on or as story-driven since, the early days of Disney animation. This is a compliment to him. He was brought in as a Marvel born and bred fan, but he had that early experience gained from watching the successes and failures of the early 2000 films, which were very, very rocky productions sometimes. He saw what worked and he saw what didn't. He came into the MCU with a clear mission statement of trying to replicate what Stan Lee did for the comics, except do it in a different medium. You cannot go into something with only the goal of replication and not innovation without dooming yourself forever to comparison. I give them full points for aiming for a different aesthetic in Snyder's early days, but they quickly doubted themselves and fell back in on the familiar, becoming just a lesser version of Marvel, a much sloppier version. They lost their trust in their creators, the worst crime in this case that you can commit. They isolated Zack Snyder, fired countless talents off The Flash, frustrated Patty Jenkins. They ticked off nearly all their actors, with pretty much their entire Justice League quitting on them, and only 2 of them remaining. When they decided to finally end the DCEU, they preemptively announced it. They didn't give the remaining movies the grace to find their audience. They were left out in the cold to die. They must know a story is only good as the creator, and sadly, there was no creator for the whole of the DCEU. There was no passionate central figure that had to see this get made. This
is all true. Like, at the end of the day, it is the executives, which I've been kind of saying throughout this entire reaction, but I don't know why my mind didn't jump to that when I was predicting who the true killer was going to be. For sure, it's the executives, and it's the fact that they didn't have a Kevin Feige, right? They didn't have a guy that they fully entrusted to be making these decisions. Right? Because, like, for better or worse, it's all on James Gunn, right? Like, it's like, maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but he's probably going to at least be able to make like 2 or 3 movies before maybe David Zaslav kicks him out. But like, whereas you had Warner Brothers studio executives that was able to boss Snyder around, there's nobody to boss James Gunn around, right? Like, and like even at that, like David Zaslav, like, yes, he's James Gunn's boss, but he's not a story guy. He's not going to start meddling with his narratives, right? The way that people were able to meddle with Zack Snyder. There's nobody to do that to James Gunn, so they needed somebody like that from the inception that had a good grounding of storytelling to be able to shepherd the DCEU.
Stream. It was something devised by a cynical group of executives that just wanted to get on bad and didn't want to be left out. It was just FOMO. So if you want to know who the real killer is, it's apathy. Apathy from the producers who are more interested in a paycheck rather than understanding why something by someone else actually succeeded. Apathy for the vision of those trusted and the people hired to bring this to life. The moviegoers' apathy when they decide there was nothing here to care about. Apathy for anything that comes next. The DCEU died from starvation because it could not find any sustenance along a road too well traveled. And so the producers let it wander, desperate, starving, and lost, before they finally made the decision to put it down. And that is case closed. And that is it for this video. Do you agree with me? Did the producers effectively kill the DCU in the crib? What do you hope to see for the new DCU under James Gunn? Thanks again for watching, and as always, be sure to subscribe for more.
All right. So, yeah, I thought that was a good video. Let me know what you think. I think I largely agree with his conclusion there. I think that there was just some weird stuff where he was just, like, saying a bunch of, like, conspiracy theory type stuff where I'm like, I'm not too sure I'm not too sure that's all true. But yeah, either way, let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.